as the crest falls, yielded from the touching spray, a wisp of love forever, a glorious mist alive, with bashful wings ascending, fading in the firmament, beyond imagination, past all visions, thoughts, and dreams. Though the blessing vanishes, staying as a memory, revealing expectations, eyes toward heaven, ears the sea. I just love that poem. Um, Thank you. The other a short one I like is shadows stand steadfast in the light upon the waters, as soft winds off an age-old sea promise counsel to man. Well, we know that heaven is the shelter of an open heart, but what's most important and why I'm here today is because the promise of education is the instruction of wisdom. That's the great promise of education, the instruction of wisdom. Now, what are the 7 pillars of wisdom? They are awe, discernment, knowledge, prudence, righteousness, spirituality, and understanding. And what is understanding? It's to know the holy. Now, I like to think of the 7 pillars of wisdom as the virtues in life, because we also have the 7 deadly sins: pride, envy, wrath, sloth, lust, avarice, gluttony. When I was in college, I had a wonderful friend of mine, Mark McAllister, who came up with the acronym PUSLAG, and it just fits. But that I think the focus of education should be on the virtues, totally on the virtues, the pillars of wisdom, and they need to leave behind this PUSLAG, this pride, envy, wrath, sloth, lust, avarice, gluttony. Now, President Barack Obama, if I may mention his name, was very promotive or encouraged qualified school academy bonds. And Hillary Clinton also talked about building schools, building schools, building schools. And you heard Javier Becerra, who also talked about building schools. I don't speak about that because I don't think you should build schools. I think the first obligation is to educate the children and educate them correctly. Are you the guy with the first name or the first name? All right. So, but that is truly what it's kind of, I hate to say this, but it's kind of what I'm all about. And I'll, go to the mat on that. The importance of creating hearts and minds deeply rooted in the living word is exactly what will protect kids as they grow up. And our schools have to focus on the content of education rather than the buildings, rather than the cafeterias, rather than the tracks, rather than the gymnasiums, rather than the big stadiums and all that stuff. You can spend as much money as you want on that, but if you're not producing kids who are doing well in school, they're worthless. It's all worthless. I'd rather have a hedgerow schools in Ireland where people used to, they didn't have seats. They'd sit down in front of hedges and they'd get lessons there. But that's just kind of the basics. What I really want to do is to focus on the holiness of things. And one of the great books of the Bible to study is the book of Numbers. You know how taxing that can be to write all those numbers down and everything? But it is a fascinating book if you stay with it and really get into it. And the book of Numbers runs through the different tribes: Asher, Benjamin, Dan, Gad, Issachar, Joseph, Judah, Manasseh, Naphtali, Levi, Manasseh, Naphtali, Reuben, Simeon, Zebulun. So they would all move through the Sinai, or move through the desert, and then they'd encamp and they'd set up the tabernacle of the congregation. And the big tribes, Dan would gather over here, another big tribe, uh, Reuben would gather over here, Simeons would gather over here, and they'd put the big tribes out, and the little tribes, Benjamin, would be right in the middle. And then the little tribes and the Levites would be right in the middle. And the interesting thing is, there were certain duties that these people in the center of who moved the tabernacle of the congregation that they had. You had the Kohathites, the Gershonites, and the Merarites, and they were all responsible for doing basic functions. And those functions were to build the tent, unwrap all the badger skins, all the curtains, put them in place, and then to move the stuff into the Holy of Holies, the lampstand, the Ark of the Covenant, all the stuff, the Holy of Holies. The great priest goes in once a year and has to be totally cleansed before he can go in. But those are holy functions. It's holy. So when we talk about educating kids, we're talking about, from my perspective, holy obligations. Now, in the middle of the not in the middle of the tabernacle of the congregation, but off to the side of the tabernacle of the congregation was the Holy of Holies. And they'd wrap those articles in different materials. And that was a responsibility of one group of people. I forget which one. I don't know if it was Kohathites, Merarites, or the Gershonites, but one of them had those responsibilities to the curtains, the drapes, the badger skins, all those things. But inside the Holy of Holies was the Ark of the Covenant. Now, who can tell me what was inside the Ark of the Covenant? Yes, the 10 Commandments, the stones that were left over. Now, let's go through those 10 Commandments. Let's take a moment and go through them and recall those. Thou shalt not make unto me any graven images. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make any graven images. Not take my name in vain. You will keep and honor the Sabbath. You will honor your father and mother. Thank God in heaven. Shall not kill. Shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. Shall not bear false witness. And you shall not covet. Okay? 10 Commandments. You teach those 10 things to kids, and if they learn those, they're not going to be backing cars into jewelry stores and robbing them or mugging people or murdering people. Thou shalt not kill. Let's get back to teaching the 10 Commandments. And I don't care what the federal government says, what the state government says. I believe the 10 Commandments should be posted in rooms. It's freedom of speech. So I'm going to transition now onto my subject, which is about the functions of education or the duties and responsibilities of education. But before I do so, I would like to say this. God bless every grandma. God bless every mother. God bless every daughter. God bless every sister. God bless every wife. You know, the burdens that you take, the services that you provide are, so taken for granted. And if there's one thing I learned from watching my mom raise 3 kids on her own because my father left when I was 5, I have this wonderful respect for women, and I always will. My mom taught me a lot, but most of all, she taught me to be gracious and be kind with women. Now, we're going to move to billionaires, and we're going to move to politicians who want to build schools. And the reason they want to build schools is because of one thing. They have their eyes on the money. In the state of California, we have 58 counties. There are over 1,000 school districts, K-12 districts, K through 8, and then high school districts, which are only high school, like high school union districts. but there are over 1,000 districts. Now, what's interesting, in each of those districts, the boards of education have a certain power, and that power is to tax. They have the power to tax. You have the state of California has high taxation as it is, and half the budget goes to education. But on top of that, they issue public school bonds for projects to build facilities, to make improvements, so on and so forth. But that power to tax is in the school board. Now, I went to college in Southern California. I won't sing the song, uh, but um, but I had a professor there by the name of Geddes McGregor, and he once said this. He goes, you know, if you think about the nature of God, which we often used to talk about in philosophy, he said, is he fleeing power? I said, interesting concept. And he goes, think about it. Think about the self-abnegation of God, that he's trying to flee his own power. He's so omnipotent, he's trying to run away from it all. And that's what we see, like this wonderful display of the universe, the stars and everything, like a wedding dress, just a beautiful, beautiful visual. And I just love that because I don't think power is anything to be seized. I don't think it's to be taken. I think power is to be fleed from. But boards have the power to tax, and they're not in the habit of fleeing from exercising that power. Now, for school bonds, they have the power to, they create a resolution, they put together a full text of the taxing measure, a ballot question, and they put forth the taxing statement, how much it's going to cost. Those four things are required to be filed with the county around 3 months. It's 88 days, but around 3 months before these bond measures get passed. So the boards don't do the bond measure themselves. They go out and get outside counsel to do it. So outside counsel comes in. These are guys who are specialists. That's what they do. They write resolutions, they do full text of measures, they write the ballot question, they put together the tax statement, and they present that to the board. And next thing you know, the board has to approve that, and then it goes to the county council to get on a ballot. That's another. I think it has to be in by 88 days before, but to get it on the ballot, it has to be cleared by county council. It's got to be cleared by the board of supervisors to make its way onto the ballot. But all of a sudden, you see this rosy little question on the ballot: support a bond for the amount of, I'm going to pick an arbitrary amount of $100 million, because they're running that. LA Unified just ran a $7 billion bond back in 2020. $7 billion. Governor Newsom tried to run a $15 billion bond for the state of California, and I think it failed. It's easier running a state bond because it's only 50% plus one. And for Prop 39 bonds, it's 55% of voter approval, but you have all these other conditions that take place. You have to have a bond oversight committee, you have to have independent audits, performance audits, and financial audits to make sure you're towing the line. But with that constitutional amendment came another law, which is the Strict Accountability in Local School Bonds Construction Act of 2000. That, my friends, is an interesting statute, because what it says is there is strict accountability for every penny you spend. Okay? Strict accountability. Now, we're going to talk about, I'm going to give you a little background. Let me try this with Lewis's guidance. Which button was it, Lewis? If I hit this, if it's divine. Apologize, folks. Yeah. Yep, now we're good. You need this? So I used to be the former general counsel at the Montebello Unified School District uh, uh, in 2000. I think it was around 2008. I was hired at Montebello Unified School District April of 2008 to be the general counsel. And in 2009, I started my own law firm. Well, it was by myself on my own law firm. Then I brought a great friend of mine in, and we started being the lawyers for Montebello School District. Let me see if can I go back one by? Yeah. All right. So I was working there till about um, 2016, and in 2016, late 2015, actually, I started doing an investigation because I had some questions about our chief business officer by the name of Ruben Rojas, about his education and about his background. This guy was right out of the California Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank. This is the bank of the state of California that makes substantial loans to public agencies where they're doing infrastructure projects. If you're putting in a water system, you're putting in reclamation, putting in pipes, putting in streets, whatever, you go to the infrastructure bank and get these loans. And he was there as a deputy executive director, and he came out of La Cañada Unified School District, where he was briefly the CBO, and then he was put in as the deputy director. So I thought that was kind of strange. Why would you leave being a deputy executive director at a $35 billion institution and come to the district? So I started taking a look at a good friend of mine. We both had some questions about him. So we decided to do our own little investigation. So we found out that he was a fraud. As a result of that, I was effectively terminated before the district fired the superintendent and the chief financial and operations officer, who both agreed with me. Right after that, the board members continued on and they sold $100 million in general obligation bonds. In November of 17, the Securities and Exchange Commission appeared and started an inquiry. The Securities and Exchange Commission is the body that has jurisdiction over what are called official statements that you file when you sell bonds. So let me walk you through this. You do the resolution, you do the tax measure, you do the ballot label, you do the tax statement, you run it, it gets approved by the voters. Now you have authority to issue up to $100 million in bonds. But when you issue those bonds, you do the transaction, and the transaction requires bond counsel, municipal advisors, disclosure counsel. It requires all these professionals to assist the board. And they issue and sell the bonds. But then you have to prepare what's known as an official statement, and you have to file that with what's called EMA, the Electronic Municipal Market Access System, which is run by the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board. And that's a website that posts all of these municipal transactions. And those municipal transactions, those postings, the official statements are supposed to be 100% correct. No lying, no falsehood. It has to be accurate. So, yeah, it's good. So, this is great. Information technology, and I don't get it.
You don't get along with it. It
Yeah.
didn't like you at all.
Might be okay.
Yeah. Well, I know. Isn't that the truth? Oh, it's just about ready to get good too. And well, it's not frozen. Hold on, let me do this.
I'm in no rush, by the way.
If you answer any
Wouldn't
questions,
surprise me.
If you answer any questions, make sure you repeat them because we have hundreds of thousands of people watching this online. This should come up in just a second. There's a massive delay. It's very odd. Sorry for everybody here and watching online also. Everything worked great, of course, before. I don't know if it has something to do with the feed because it's not pulling up quick enough. So there's a massive delay here. And it's not coming out. One last chance, or then you get to wing it. I think it's time for you to sing.
You don't want to hear my singing. Trust me.
Okay, now that we reset it, he is just only hit that button. And looks like it's going. There we go. Perfect. Next one. And one more after that. Okay. Bam.
So in November of 2017, the Securities and Exchange Commission showed up and started an inquiry into the school district. And then at around the same time, the California State Auditor showed up, and the California State Auditor made a number of recommendations to the Board of Education of the Montebello Unified School District. And one of those was that the board should hire executives who meet minimum qualifications and that they should verify individuals hold both an administrative credential and a teaching credential before appointing them to the position of an assistant superintendent or an associate superintendent. That's very clear. In the education code, there are certain officers and agents that are defined. Under Education Code Section 35028, if you're a district superintendent, a deputy superintendent, an associate superintendent, or an assistant superintendent, to use the word superintendent, you have to have a teaching credential, which is, I forget, I think it's 2 years to get one, to earn your first one. And then it can go a final after a few more years, or maybe even then. But the important thing is you have to get an administrative credential, which can take up to 5 years to perfect. So when you get these two credentials, you've been in education long enough to have the ability to move to the superintendent level. So Section 35028 says you have to have teaching credential and administrative credential. Newsflash. The superintendent at San Francisco Unified School District does not have a valid teaching credential and does not have a valid administrative credential. Maria Sue, she was appointed by Gavin Newsom to some position at the city of San Francisco in managing some children's program. All of a sudden, she's moved over to chief finance, as she's the CFO in that position, and she's moved over to be superintendent of San Francisco Unified School District. She's not permitted under Section 35028. Now, at Montebello, the state auditor was there, said you have to have these, you have to get people in who are qualified. So the state and the county of Los Angeles, the Los Angeles County Office of Education, turned to Capital Advisors Group, and the county engaged Capital Advisors Group to provide Mark Scrivana as a fiscal advisor. So he had power to stay and rescind board action, saying you can do that, you can't do this. So he's going to kind of control the district or keep an eye on the board while they get better. The SEC 2 years later files charges in September of 2019. Files charges against the former CBO Ruben Rojas, the interim superintendent who was the superintendent then, or was the interim first, then became the superintendent, Anthony Martinez, and the district itself for fraud involved in the issuance and sale of public school bonds. So Scrivana was at our district in 2017 through 19, and then he was sent down to focus on Sweetwater Union High School District, where there was also a question as to bonds. The SEC later filed charges against the chief business officer at Sweetwater Union High School District. After that happened, Scrivana was named interim superintendent at Montebello Unified School District. In November of 2020, the lawyers at the district handed off duties to some of their associates and colleagues. So we had a group of lawyers that were in, and they had their friends, and as they left, they put their friends in. The following, that should be, so lawyers at MUSD, that's actually in February of 2021. In March of 21, Scrivana was named assistant superintendent. No one checked his background because he had been a superintendent at Baldwin Park Unified School District for about 13 years before, way back a ways. And remember the California State Auditor's recommendation. The district should verify that individuals hold both an administrative credential and a teaching credential before appointing them to the position of superintendent or assistant superintendent. Now, the lawyers did not, neither did the new superintendent of human resources. They presumed because he was from Baldwin Park Unified School District and had been there for 13 years, they presumed that he was a valid superintendent. So did Capital Advisors Group. Myself, I was once bitten, twice shy. In March of 2022, the board transmitted an official statement to EMA, the website, Electronic Municipal Marketing Access, and they did that because they sold over $12 million in refunding bonds. That means they're going to refund the bonds, get a better rate, and so they reported to the EMA. Then, after they did the $12 million in general obligation bonds on the report filed with EMA, Carlos Perez, a local lawyer, questioned if Scrivana was fully qualified or duly qualified because he read something somewhere and questioned his credentials. But the inquiry was kept on the down low. So in March of 2022, this official statement gets filed with EMA, and in it, it says, Mark Scrivana holds a Bachelor of Science in Aeronautical Engineering, a Master of Science in Strategic Leadership, and a doctoral degree in business. That's in the March 2022 official statement. Carlos Perez writes in about June of 2022 or July of 2022, questioning the credentials, but that didn't stop the district from going ahead with a sale on October 20th of 2022 of $100 million in school bonds. And in that report, they also say Mr. Scavarna holds a Bachelor of Science in Aeronautical Engineering, a Master of Science in Strategic Leadership, and a doctoral degree in business. So it wasn't until later, about a year or so later, that I learned that he didn't have credentials. I said, you got to be kidding me. He's a superintendent he was a superintendent of Baldwin Park. He's got to have credentials. Someone whispered to me, no, he doesn't have any. I said, don't start. I mean, I've been through this with the last guy. This can't happen again. So I walk away and then I think, I better go check. So I checked with the California the state of California Teachers Teaching Commission, and I check on their educator online, and I take a look, and it turns out he doesn't have any credentials whatsoever. So I started doing some research on Scavarna's credentials. So I had to go back to all of his school districts. The first one I went to was La Cañada Unified School District. This is an official statement. This official statement is filed with Emma. And here it says it has the heading Superintendent and Administrative Personnel. And it says, Mr. Scavarna holds a bachelor's degree jointly granted by the College of the Air Force and Utah State University. He is enrolled in a business administration program. So I checked with Utah State University. He was a part-time undergraduate for about 4 months in 1980, no degrees awarded. Uh-oh, we got a problem. So I started looking at the record.
David, let me check in real quick. Folks, we have these binders here. If anybody wants one, it's the actual evidence and you can take it with you.
So now this is a 1995 official statement. So he gets hired by Baldwin Park around 1999, and he's put in the position of a deputy superintendent, but he's remember, if you're a deputy, you have to have a teaching credential and an administrative credential. But if you're a deputy superintendent in a business-related position, you can get away with just being a deputy superintendent. Business services, you get it? You can call them by business services. But he just uses the deputy superintendent deal, so everybody believes he's got credentials. Now, what's most important, and this gets really scary, in 2001, they put him on the letterhead correctly. They have Susan Parks, superintendent, Mark Scavarna, deputy superintendent, business services. But they don't put any biography about him in that statement in 2001. They don't do it in 2003, 2004, 2005. They don't do any official statements. In 2002, the board went ahead and approved a $46.6 million bond. So in 2000, they're issuing for 2003, they're issuing for 2004, they're issuing tranches. They're smaller, we want 15 million, we'll take 10 million this year, we'll do 5 million this year. So they're putting those bonds out, and they don't put this biography section in. Nothing, there's not a word about his past. So they get to 2006, and there's only about $17 million left. And then the board issues 17 million in what are called long-term capital appreciation bonds. Very expensive, very bad, very, very bad for taxpayers and for residents. But the 46.6 million has been exhausted.